Welcome to Vision Chat, a podcast about spiritual topics, with your hosts, Virginia and Stina.
Hello and welcome back to Vision Chat. Today, Virginia and I are interviewing Samantha Lourie. Samantha Lourie has been running journaling workshops and online self-love, self-care courses since 2015, particularly her Soul Reset courses, which have just recently evolved into her The Goddess in Her Mess series. She has always been curious about the complexities of human condition, and she uses her work to facilitate emotional integration and wholesome self-exploration, developing an approaching that seeks to make the difficult areas of life like grief, loss, and stress more approachable and manageable. She has a sizable social media following under her business, Butterflies and Pebbles, and describes herself as a free spirit poet slash writer mama. Welcome, Samantha.
Hi.
It's so nice to have you on here.
Thank you for the invite. I'm really happy to be here today.
Yeah. Do you want to start talking a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So my business is Butterflies and Pebbles, and I've been working on social media, I think, since 2012. And I actually started a page on Facebook because I just finished writing a trilogy, and I was tired of being in my imagination. Lots of with the fiction, I was just exhausted with the process of storytelling, but I still wanted to write, and it just took off really. It grew really quite quickly, and I started to share my poetry and more thoughts, and then I opened up a little space to sell my thoughts because I saw other people doing that. They were like selling quotes of mine. I thought, I could do this too. And then I had my little shop on Etsy, and really since then it's just gone from strength to strength. But it's a different space now, kind of 10, 11 years on. Social media has gone through so many changes, and I'm just kind of riding the waves as best as possible, but wanting to branch out as well. And that's why I recently published my first book called The Power of Mess, and that was released early summer of last year.
I'm fascinated by your poetry. I'm a huge fan and I just love it. It sometimes, makes me smile, brightens my day, or sometimes it even brings tears to my eyes just because it's so deep and it just touches me in like very profound ways. And so I'm just very grateful to you for your talent and for sharing it with the world. And I wanted to ask you, so what got you into writing, or what motivated you to, have you always been a writer, or is this something that developed over the years? How did you get your start?
Yeah, well, I'm so glad that you're moved by my poetry, because it's something I kind of weave in and out of sharing it. I kind of I do poetry and then I do prose. And I actually call my work more like prosody now, because I like to write lots, but I love the kind of poetical edge that I try to bring in and play around with the meaning of words and mix them up, and just kind of, I do it because I want to try and bypass the obstacles in the mind and get straight into the heart. So that's really the intention behind using the poetic vibe, that I try to incorporate in my prose as well. And lots of people have mentioned that about the Power of Mess, that it doesn't read like a typical self-help book. It's really quite poetical. And again, that's just become my style, because I just think when you feel, when you get into the feeling of things, it just opens you up more to the possibility of processing and learning, discovering, and daring yourself to move beyond kind of old thought patterns, and yeah, just, experiences that might be holding you back. So I think poetry is just such a powerful medium, and it's a way to bypass, to get through all the other, the blinkers that we have up normally when we approach something, especially in book form as well. So yeah, so it's lovely. And actually my soul resets were very poetical. So my soul resets were these 30-day experiences where we would work through 10 principles, kind of circulating around the concept of self-love. But I would begin every principle with about 3 or 4 pages of poetry. It was my favorite part of each principle, was to just use the principle as the theme and then work off it with a spiral of different words and just kind of spin my readers, I suppose, and have a dance with their imaginations and then settle in. And then we go into the more, the kind of deeper, more introspective aspect of focusing in on, whatever it was that we were looking at in the self-love content. Yeah, I will always fall back on poetry, and I will always send it out. I think it's really dear to me, and I only actually really dived into my poetry later on in my writing. Actually, I did a lot more social observation stuff, lots of journaling, and lots of kind of like essays, because I studied English literature and language at university. So it's only really in my mid-20s that I started to write poetry, and I did that in response to actually really slowly coming to terms with the sadness in my heart, I think. And that's maybe why it gets into people's hearts, because I wanted to put words to what I felt, but in a way that was palpable and accessible. And again, the whole idea of bypassing the mind and getting to the heart felt like if I could go raw, and if I could kind of get so brutally honest, but using kind of beautiful imagery and heartfelt imagery in our daily world, that it would just match together and get my message across, or get my cry across sometimes as well. So yeah, I think my poetry was born out by sadness, really. And so so in a sense, it was very, very spiritual for me. It was a real kind of like spiritual expression of me replenishing and recovering and healing my heart as well. So yeah.
It sounds therapeutic.
Really good. Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I that's why I started writing. I started writing for me. I started writing because I didn't have anywhere to go where I could just speak. So I started to just put my words down on paper, and it was so freeing because I could just say anything. The paper doesn't judge you back, the pen doesn't turn around at you and wiggle its finger at you. And yeah, it was so therapeutic, and it was really what's the word? It was really purging. It was really purging. It was a wonderful way to empty. And so when I started up my page on Facebook, that's where I went immediately. I went really intimate, really personal, and it just struck a chord, I think, in my readership and just beyond, with like other audiences, because nobody was really talking so intimately or writing so intimately at the time, not that I was aware of. Everything that I was seeing was very much kind of like quote books, very, like, this is what you have to do in order to mend your life, and A, B, C, D. Whereas I would write stuff, and again, it wouldn't be like this, but just as an example, I don't know how to mend my life, and that's what I have to begin with every day. And everybody went like, ouch, okay. Yeah, that resonates. I haven't heard that before. What's she going to say next? And I think that's how I pulled in my audience. And I've just remained that way, I think, the whole way through. And my writing is actually my best when it's most honest and when it reflects where I am in my life, and that's why I'm really excited about this, The Goddess in Her Mess, because I've kind of evolved my soul resets, because my soul resets were no longer reflecting my everyday life. It was something that I had kind of moved on from, whereas the Goddess in Her Mess kind of meets me where I'm at now. So I'm really excited to jump into my work in this way and get to that point of sharing from such an honest point of view, because I really think that's where our power lies. Our power lies in us being vulnerable and transparent and courageous with it, you know?
I think it's so strong and powerful of you to kind of not really. I feel like a lot of people wants to hide the vulnerable side, especially in public and on social media and stuff like that. And just by taking that leap of faith too, I guess, and showing it to others, that is very beautiful.
Yeah, you know what, Delight? I can't. My life isn't polished, you know. Like, my life isn't. It's not perfect. It's, you know, I'm working things out every day. And, you know, one of your questions, you're like, what do you call yourself? Well, I don't really call myself anything, and lots of people will call me a teacher, and I always say I'm not. I'm not a teacher. I know I look like one. I know I sound like one. But a teacher, you know, a teacher knows. A teacher is an expert in a field that they're teaching, you know, and I don't feel I ever get there. I don't get to kind of, I don't get to the point where I feel like I'm an expert at, you know, work, you know, an expert at how to live life or how to be vulnerable, you know, like, because every day I meet my weaknesses. Every day I meet my frailty. I mean, maybe not every day, but you know, most days I am challenged. Most days, you know, I don't know which way to go. And what I have learned to do over the years is how to integrate that and how to not be overwhelmed by that and how to move through that like I would move through happiness, you know, or, you know, feelings of love and joy, you know, so it doesn't freak me out as much. But I'm very invested in the human experience, in the reality of things. And that's what I want to bring across. I'm not good at bringing you the finished article. And so that's why I don't like the teacher hat, because I think that's what people then expect. What I will bring you is the process and what I've learned along the process as I continue to process. But don't hold me to it, because I can change any minute, because life will do that, you know? Life will do that, and it will get you to confront parts of yourself that you've never seen before. And in that moment, you feel like a very different person. It's it's an interesting way to run a business. I think is an interesting way to share a message. I'm not so much about the 7-point plan. You know, I've had so many people interview me and they want to know, you know, what are the 3 ways in which to deal with your mess, and what are the, you know, and I've had to really sit down and think about constructing what I have learned into that kind of format, because that's just not how I live. It's not how I do things. And I mean, it works sometimes, but other times it doesn't. And what do you do then, you know? So yeah, being vulnerable and getting the kind of like the behind the scenes kind of aspect of how things work out, of how things happen. I think that's really something that's missing. And it's something I've always been interested in. I haven't really ever wanted to know the what. I've always wanted to know about the person, how they got there, you know? So the person will say, this is what you have to do. But I'm like, but what was your journey? How did you get to this truth? Like, tell me about you, you know? Like, that's what I want to know, because that's what makes sense to me, because I'm you. Like, we're in this, we're doing the same kind of thing. So that's what I tried to bring. And I use my life, I use my stories, my journey as a way to get people thinking about their own. And so I use my poetry to get people thinking about their own poetry, like their own song, what's going on inside of them, their own feelings. And and it works best for me that way. Otherwise, you know, all the other hats, too much pressure. Can't deal with it.
I think it's so interesting, and I don't know if this is like culturally, but like here in the US, it's like very like goal focused,
Right.
and it is very much about like, solve this issue and just follow these 3 steps. And, it's not reality, I don't think. I think that sets people up for some kind of disappointment if they're like, okay, but then I follow the 3 steps and I'm still not where you said I would be. So now what? Now maybe it's me. Maybe I did it wrong, or there's something wrong with me. So I think if it sets people up to feel like they failed in some way, or like there's some huge disappointment, or there's something wrong with them, right? And the reality is, it's, you know, kind of like what you were saying. Isn't it a process? Aren't we
Yeah.
all in this journey together? And you know, it's so refreshing then to hear that you're like, okay, I'm focused in the process,
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
nobody's perfect. I'm not perfect. And
Yeah.
I'm not pretending to be, I'm not putting that out there. I'm actually being vulnerable and showing you who I really am. And that takes a lot of courage.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I just basically, I feel very much like everybody who kind of jumps onto my courses. I just say I just spend long. But the difference is that I, my work is this. So what I spend longer in this stuff, and that's why I have more words, and that's why maybe why I can explain it. But what I'm feeling and what you're feeling are the same thing. You know, so I kind of I've always imagined that my writing and my poetry, that I voice what we are all going through, because that's what I spend my time doing. I spend my time watching that and observing that and feeling it through and putting words to it. And that's what makes me different. But the experience is all the same. I'm still in there. I'm still life is still messy, but I just can put words to it. And so I think when people come to my work, they're like, yes, that's what I'm going through. Yes, I get that. That's my experience too, you know? And that's what I offer, you know, and that's what I try to facilitate. I try to just put words to this very complicated and diverse experience of being human at this point in our history, at this point in our world and our world's history. It, I just don't think life can be summarized in 3 points or 7 points. And I think you're right. I think we're always in flux. We're always changing. You know, we're always growing. We're always moving, and not just us, but you know, like, so not just me, but you as well, and you as well, and then how that impacts on one another, you know, like, so life is constantly expanding and moving and becoming. So the process for me is safe. The process for me is where it always comes back. The process for me is where it stays. And you have moments of epiphany, and you have moments of, I found it, I'm there. And they're beautiful. And we have to take those and enjoy those, because they're kind of like peaks on the mountaintop, you know. But at some point, you know, you'll be looking out and you'll be enjoying the scenery, and then you see there's another mountain to climb, you know, and it's like, oh, back to the process of climbing, you know. So yeah, I'm all about the journey, really. I'm not, you know, if I always tell people, if you're coming to me because you want to find a destination, you might not find it. You know? But if you want to make peace with the journey that you're on, and if you want to develop, you know, a new perspective on it, so that you can welcome in the experiences and you can feel good about yourself and stronger in yourself as you do, then, you know, I can help with that for sure, you know.
I love your mindset. And I was wondering if you have you always been like that since you were a child, that you were thinking of different perspectives and have such an open mind too?
Yeah, I thought, I mean, I've always kind of, I've been, yeah, I can't even remember when I wasn't thinking about why we suffer, you know, and why, yeah, why we're sad, and why we're complicated, and, you know, why is there so much going on in life, and why is there so much going on between people, you know, and why are things not straightforward? So yeah, I've always been very introspective, I think. You know, I've always, you know, thought about things in a deep way, sometimes too deep. My friends be like, can we just leave it now? Can we just have fun? My friends used to say I was like the seed form gal, you know, because I would look at the smallest thing happening and just, like, you know, find the whole tree in it, you know. So yeah, it's been with me for as long as I can remember, and I just wanted to put words to it. It was always interesting for me to make these abstract experiences more solid, you know, something more tangible, so that we can work with them. When everything is abstract, it becomes bottomless, you know, or it is bottomless, you know, there is no end to it. It's shapeless, and it almost has some kind of power over you because you don't ever really know what you're dealing with. So I was always interested in finding the words to pin experiences down so that we could have a relationship together rather than me just feel overwhelmed by all the feelings inside of me. How can I kind of like create a conversation with them so that I don't feel so small when dealing with all this complex stuff happening inside of me? So I was always quite a deep thinker, I think, which wasn't always great, you know. It meant I was quite boring sometimes, and when to drop it and just, you know, just have fun or whatever. And actually, as I've gotten older, I've learned how to bring in more joy into my life, you know, how to kind of like balance it out. And I had to be very intentional about it, and, you know, like tell myself when it's time to stop reflecting and actually just start being, and, you know, just start blissing out and just enjoying the moment, you know. So yes, I'm much better now, but I was quite serious as a teenager for sure.
That's so funny. How do you practice that? How do you bring yourself from this place of introspection to a place of like, oh, okay, because it sounds like, you know, you're fascinated by all living things and just everything around you. You find something to observe. So I feel like then you go into this world, right, where you're studying, you're observing, and you're noticing. And how do you move from that into like, oh, okay, now I have to experience
Yeah.
the joy and the life and participate? Because that's a tricky transition, I think, if you don't catch it.
No, absolutely. And and I think you have to be really intentional about it. Whatever doesn't come natural to you. I think, you know, I think part of being spiritual is that you work out what is natural for you, and then you work out what isn't natural for you. And you want to kind of obviously grow and nurture the things that are natural for you, but you really want to focus on the stuff that doesn't come easy, you know, because that's where you feel that you're missing something anyway. Like that's you getting honest with yourself, and that's probably where your longing is as well, you know. And definitely for so long my longing was to be happy, to find joy, you know, to find peace and be at rest, you know. It was, I mean, personally, it made more sense to me after having my first child and seeing joy come so easy for her and feeling a bit jealous. You know, it's like, hold on. Hold on. What is this? What is this feeling that comes upon her, you know, that I see come through her eyes? Like, what is this? I want more of this. And actually, I tell you what, and it was through that the switch happened for me. You don't have to have children to have this like awakening or this epiphany, but this is the switch that I made. I had to start giving myself permission. It really did begin with permission. I realized that I was stopping myself. Joy was a kind of like a scary thing to do. It was a scary place to be, and I wasn't familiar with it. I felt sad for many years growing up. So I was so familiar with the sad, so familiar with the dark. The darkness, bring it on, you know, like I will sit with the darkness for days, weeks, months, whatever, you know. I learned very early on not to be scared of that, right? But I was really scared of the light, of the ease, you know, even though that's what I longed for the most. And so I realized that I had to start giving myself permission to almost like dip my feet in it, you know, kind of like, you know, the tide along the beach side, you know, like just to kind of like just to go in a little bit and just to feel it and just to let myself feel it. And as I started giving myself permission, then the question was, okay, why don't I do this? Why don't I give myself permission? Why is it such an artificial thought almost, you know, that I have to kind of lean into? And then I realized it was to do with worthiness. It was to do with not feeling worthy enough to be happy, not feeling worthy enough to enjoy and not have a problem to solve, you know, and to get to the bottom of. And so then I had to start growing that. I had to start thinking about, okay, why don't I feel worthy? And again, I suppose I went into introspection. It was kind of familiar to me. You know, I used what is easy for me. Why don't I feel worthy? But why is my child worthy? Like instantly, my child is worthy of everything. She's going to get every moment of joy I can give her, every moment of bliss. Why don't I do that to myself? And then everything started to become a mirror to me. Why do I want everyone else to feel so worthy and joyous and good? Why am I such a good friend and will do everything for everybody else, but then I don't do it to me? So it's permission. The blockage to giving permission is the lack of worthiness. How do I then start feeling worthy of things? I've got to look at my narrative. I've got to look at the story I tell myself. And I've got to start looking at it from a different perspective, a different angle, a more objective angle, maybe to come out of my own perception of things and kind of look at things from more of a bird's eye view. And that really, really helped, actually. I suppose it was kind of introspection, but really from a very different point of view. It wasn't so kind of like internal, it was more from a kind of outside view, which in some ways is really quite is how I understand part of the spiritual experience, that you kind of, you know, you have your internal world, but then you have the external world, and bring the two together is where the magic happens, where the balance is. And I talk about kind of like getting right up close to things, but then also taking a step back so you can see the whole picture. And actually, it was the whole picture that really helped me to forgive myself, helped me to not be so hard on myself, and to remember myself away from my internal critic, you know, the kind of that voice that would say nothing I ever did was good enough. You know, really kind of balanced that out for me. So yeah, I hope I've answered that question. I've gone off a bit, but yeah.
Well, actually, you brought up a really interesting point, and now you may not have the answer for this, and I'm not putting you on the spot, so please don't feel pressure.
Sure.
But it's so interesting that you bring up this example of your child, right? And looking at your baby and being like, without a doubt, this child deserves all the happiness right off the bat. Are we all born that way? And then where do we lose that? Right?
Oh,
That,
yeah.
like, because I would imagine we're all born that way, right? Not even, that's not even a question. We
Right.
experience love and joy, and where do we lose that? How do we lose that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a huge question. And you're right. I mean, you know, that's what kind of changed it for me. It was the the desire that I had for my child. It was mesmerizing. It was healing in itself. But then it was, I used to be her. So why am I so different with myself now? Why didn't I do this to myself? And I suppose I've been on that journey ever since of really kind of like remothering, you know, myself, reparenting myself, you know, that little one inside of me. And where do we lose it? I mean, that's so deep, but I still, you know, you find like more and more answers, I think, as you go along. You know, I don't think there is just one answer. I think there's so much to it, because like I said, this human experience is so complex, and we are so impressionable, and we're so impacted, you know, by one another. But I think it really boils down to, if you wanted to generalize, and I mean generalize, i.e. this might not fit in with every story, with every experience, but it comes down to guardianship. It comes down to, yeah, how we were brought up to go into the world, how we were loved, how we, you know, what our family life was like, what our home life was like. Because what I see with my children is just how quickly they pick up on anything. So I've got a 5-year-old now. She's my youngest. I have 3, and there's quite a big age gap between my older 2 and her. But I'll say something like, "Oh, I don't like oranges anymore." She's like, "Yeah, I don't like them either anymore," you know, and she'll just mimic, and I'm just like, "Whoa." I've got to be careful what I say I do and don't like, you know. Words are very important. And also time is so important. So it's about kind of like the time that you were given when you were little, the words that were spoken to you when you were little, what you were noticing around you when you were little. So much of what we are dealing with in our adult life is to do with what we pick up in those first few years of living in this world, so open, so ready, so eager, so curious, so excited. What's the word? So integrated almost. Like, you know, I watch my child and there is no thought about whether she can or she cannot. She just does, you know? And that is the point of vulnerability, transparency, courage, and power right there, you know? And so it's in that kind of like mindset and that framework of seeing the world that we are so open to everything and anything. And I think what we pick up on in those years is what we are then peeling away in our latter years. And, you know, I do think we get to a point, maybe, I don't know, some people say in their 40s. I'm still working out stuff in my childhood and I'm 43, you know. But we get to a point where we take on the position of parenting ourselves, and quite in a way it's kind of like the process of individuation, where you cut the kind of the cord, the umbilical cord, from, you know, your family, from your past, from your experiences, and you start to carve out your own. And I like to talk about it in terms of storytelling. You have your old story, you know, and you honor that story and you be true to that story and you bring up that story, you allow it to emerge from all the rubble. But then at some point you start writing a new story. And so what I see right now in social media, I mean, I was talking about story many years ago, but it's really, really popular now. Like it wasn't really that popular then. But it's really popular now. It's a lot about narrative, a lot about your story, honoring your story. But what I feel needs to happen now, actually, is there's a new transition that I think the kind of collective heart is calling for, which is now to write a new story. You know, you honor that story, but then what about now? You know, we honor our story so that we can let it go, you know, kind of like let it go. Like I imagine us being like on the edge of a cliff and just blowing it and letting it go, letting the wind just take it away, and you thanking it for everything that it's given to you and not given to you, and made of you and not made of you. And then now, what happens now? And I talk about kind of, you know, being the new trees, you know, in the family tree, like stepping away and being the new tree, creating a new family tree, creating a new genealogy, like a new kind of pathway. What does that look like? You know, who are you? And I was asking some of my ladies this question the other day. I was like, you know, if I asked you who you are and you weren't allowed to tell me that you were a wife or a partner, or that you are a mother, or that you are a daughter, what would you say? If you took away all those kind of like strong aspects of your narrative arc, what would be left? And it's a really interesting question. And it doesn't mean that defining who we are in our intimate relationships is a problem, because it's not. It's essential. You know, we live and we grow through the feedback that we get from our immediate and intimate world, and the people that we love and grow intimate relationships with. That's so important. It's so essential to me, who I am as a mother, who I am as a wife, who I am as a best friend, who I am as a daughter. But there's more. And diving into that every now and again and having time for that every now and again, I think is also really, really important. And I think it kind of like, it really does start to answer the question of what will your family tree look like now when you break away from whatever it is that you leave behind you. So the new story for me is something I'm really, really fascinated in. Just the story now, just the kind of the story framework, I think it's really, really helpful. And I've found it to be even more helpful. And I write about this in my book, The Power of Mess, than thinking about us in terms of purpose. Because I think when you're talking about yourself in terms of story, there's this idea that it's ongoing, you know, that there's no end, you know, and that when you get to the last chapter, there might be a sequel, you know, like I've written trilogies before, you know, like you never know when it's coming to an end. That's a beautiful thing. Whereas with purpose, it feels like it's more cemented. It feels like you can miss it or not. It feels like you can get it right or you can get it wrong, you know. Whereas with story, it allows for space to make mistakes, to fall off your path, to come back on, you know, to meet your ogres, to fly with the angels, to be in the mud for a while. And nothing is final. There's always a you know, like a second wind on its way. There's always tomorrow. There's always a new dawn. So yes, I'm really interested in that, and that's what I'm going to be focusing on more through the goddess and her mess, but also the new story. The new story is really, really interesting for me because it's all about kind of self-responsibility and life ownership, which I think is where we find our voice the most.
That is so beautiful said. And I think it's so important too that people also understand that we are kind of living in our old stories if we don't really get into that, watch it, and do something about it and say, like, okay, detach from it, I guess. And because I think some people might think, like, if I just ignore it or if I just hide the skeleton in the closet, it will be away. But it's not really like that. And I think that can also hinder a lot of people of getting to their purpose, as you said, and creating the new story that they want to and that they deserve.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think life doesn't start for you until you commit to really living, you know, so we can live like we're surviving, you know, like we're just being lived through almost. And then we can say, I actually now really want to start living. And I think, you know, and how you said that, Stina, it just reminds me of my book, The Power of Mess, where I talk about the mess doesn't go. You can avoid it as much as you want, you know, like you can create a whole life away from this mess that you're like, you know, trying to avoid, but it will come, it will keep on coming until you meet with it, because in order for you to really experience your potential and experience the possibilities and experience your power, you've got to face yourself. You've got to confront everything that is you know. And I think, you know, because you wrote, one of the questions was, what do you think is misconceived about spirituality? I think one of the things that is misconceived about spirituality is that people see it as an escape route from dealing with the mess of life, you know. I grew up in quite a religious home, and then I kind of rebelled against that by going really into this kind of like spiritual quest. And I kind of found a middle ground, you know, like over the years of realizing that I was just escaping, you know, I was just running away from myself. And then when I stopped running away from myself, I got a bit more balanced and, you know, used my spirituality to meet myself rather than to pretend I wasn't here, you know. And it's so easy, I think, to get lost in either service. I've got a big thing about that, getting lost in just serving others and just sacrificing yourself and trying to be that beacon of love when you're like dying on the inside, you know. It's so easy to lose yourself in yeah, I suppose trying to alleviate other people's pain, or when you yourself have pain. I always say, if you are in pain, stop. Stop trying to help everybody else and really help yourself, because you will learn so much about how to help the human heart when you start helping yourself, and then you can help others after, you know. But I find that lots of people will try to help themselves by focusing on other people's pain, but it just doesn't work. Something goes horribly wrong because you are, like I say, you know, you're kind of corroding on the inside. And I know that because that was my experience. I went so deep into kind of like people pleasing and sacrificing myself and being a good person, but I actually became a really unhappy and not very nice person because of it, you know, which is really interesting. But I kind of like covered up myself in spiritual pursuits, in practicing spiritual principles on the outside. But I was just so far away from myself, you know, as I was doing it. And it was only when I actually faced me and just said, all right, world, I'm going to come back to you when I'm better. You know, I've got to sort this out now. That's actually when my true, like, that's when my healing journey began. I suppose what happens with spirituality is that you can either escape yourself or heal yourself. you know, and I used spirituality for maybe, how many years? Maybe nearly 10 years to escape myself. And then I used spirituality to heal myself. And it's a very, very different experience. And, you know, the spiritual world from my eyes now is a very different place, different world, because of it. So it's, you know, you've got to go there. You've really got to go there. And you're right. You can't get to the new story, I think, until you deal with the old story. That's the truth. I think you can try the new story, but you'll just get frustrated. It just won't fit. It just won't stick. You know, you'll be stopping and starting, you know. You've got to get to the old stuff. But then what we're not talking about enough right now is that there's a time and a place for the old story. And what I've learned in my own experience is that the ghosts won't leave you until you start to walk away from them, you know? So you can sit with your ghosts and you can understand everything about your past, but they'll just keep on having lots to say. They'll keep saying the same thing, or they'll have more to say, have more to talk about, more past stuff, more past stuff, more past stuff. At some point, you have to just leave them behind. What is what else is there? I need to look up. It's like we spend so much time looking in, which is necessary, but I don't think a lot of us hear the call to start looking up. I think this can get quite comfortable, which is really interesting because we run away from it for so long, but then it gets quite comfortable just to do this, you know? And actually we have to look up and go, okay, what is new? What can I create? What is waiting for me now? And so what I'm seeing at the moment, and this is quite, you know, this is a bit controversial, but I'm going to be talking more about it over the next, you know, in the next wave of my work, is that there's a real kind of like, I think kind of like asymmetrical focus on being a victim. You know, like we kind of like really, there's such a strong victim mentality now all over social media. You know, it's so comfortable to be in, you know, that victim mindset and that trauma mindset as well. And I remember with my miscarriages, I remember when I was going through I think it was my second one, I got so many women writing to me because I shared it on social media. Basically, I kind of, I did the announcement too early. I said, I'm pregnant, you know? And then, you know, after a few weeks later, I wasn't pregnant anymore. So I was like, what do I do with this? I just opened this up to my whole, you know, my whole online world. Where do I go with this? And I was like, I might as well just keep going with it. Just share, you know, just let everyone know what's going on because I've committed, you know, I've done this. So I did, and I had so many women like share with me such beautiful stories, such tragic, you know, sad, you know. Yeah, it was a really kind of deep and emotional time. But what was really interesting, I remember there's one lady who I think she was 84, and she said when I read your story, she said I was immediately taken back to the hospital, you know, 50 years ago or 60 years ago or something, when I miscarried. And it's incredible because on, you know, I've never really acknowledged it, but there's always been a piece of me missing because of that, you know. And that so struck me. And no, and this is not her victimizing herself at all. It was such a beautiful story, and we had a lovely conversation. And you know, it was so beautiful. But I said to myself through that, I said, I wonder if I can get to a point where I don't feel like a piece of me is missing. Because you do feel like that. You really feel like you've lost something inside of you that you're never going to get back again. I was like, is there a way to still feel whole? I want to feel whole. I don't want these experiences to make me feel like I'm missing, like I'm not fully here. Like I'm, you know, I really want to see if I can, I don't want to always feel like this. You know, I don't always want to feel like this. It was a long journey, really, really long journey of going through the grief and the trauma of it all. And it was really, really dark, really, really heavy. Maybe the heaviest I've gone through so far. I write about it in my book, and I said the reason why it was so heavy is because it was all internal, it was all inside of me. there was nothing I could kind of put onto outside factors, whereas all the other stuff I had healed from, I could leave at someone else's feet. Well, that happened to me because of that person, or that happened to me because of that event, or whatever. But all of this was so inside of me. It was just me, myself, and I, you know. And also the reason why I couldn't numb myself from it was because that experience of losing my babies was the only thing I had left of my connection with them. They were no longer inside of me, so I only had the experience of losing them to hold on to work with, to try and metabolize, like make into something of life, so that I could keep them alive inside of me somehow, you know. But it was really always interesting to me to at some point leave the grief, like leave the trauma, to say goodbye to the trauma, to leave the demons or the ghosts at my feet, kind of like wanted to pull me back, you know. And I remember when I got pregnant with my third Earthside daughter, I remember when I went to have a meeting with the midwife, and she mentioned something, I can't remember what it was, but it triggered me. I can't remember. I've written about it somewhere, but sorry, it triggered me, and it reminded me. I think she asked me just about the miscarriages, and it reminded me. I called my first miscarriage the baby Nova, and she said, "Did you call her by name?" And I said, "I did. Her name was Nova." As soon as I said that, I started to clench. I just started to get really hard. I stopped looking at her. I was looking away, and I could feel my body just close down. It's like my body wanted to protect me from this possible happening of losing another child again. Everything was just, you know. And so she kept on talking to me, and obviously maybe she's aware of it or not, I don't know. But I can feel there's this wrestling going on inside of me. And I think that this happens when we are victim of experiences of bad stuff happening, of tragedy or whatever. At some point where there's this new landscape calling us, there's this struggle that happens, you know. It's almost like Jacob's ladder, you know, kind of like, I don't know, it's like a wrestling that you have. And I felt everything wanted to close and just stay kind of like safe and familiar with whatever I had left of my experience of Nova, and to not try for the new story, to not try for the new chapter, because what if everything goes wrong? What if everything is shattered once again? You know, what if I have to, what if the darkness comes back? You know, what if I hold another lifeless child in my arms? What if? And I just held my body. I remember when she's talking, she's probably not aware, maybe she is, I don't know. And I'm talking, I'm just giving lip service, because I'm just telling my body, I'm saying, it's okay. I feel you. I understand you. But body, this is a new moment. And I want to believe that there is new for me. I want to believe that there is something else for us. I want to step into the unknown, because I don't want to feel like this is always going to pull me back from life. There is a moment here for us. We're going to walk it. I want you to trust me. I want us to do this together. And it's almost like I forced my fists open, you know? And I forced myself to look at her. And normally the trigger would make me just become overwhelmed with the physical kind of sensation of closing down. And I remember just pushing myself to open, and I'd start taking deep breaths, and I made myself relax. And again, it was really artificial, because my body was wanting to do something completely different. But there was like this still voice inside of me, this knowing, which was connected to the new, which was connected to the bigger story, something that I still hadn't really tapped into, but just knew a sense of. And it was saying, keep going. Keep crossing the bridge, okay? Keep walking. The ghosts are going to lose power. They're going to get tired, you know? Outdance those demons. And I remember just walking out of that hospital, knowing that I had done something, that I had created some kind of shift. And that was really interesting for me, to see me work with my trauma in that way, to see me work with my triggers in that way, and to realize that the trauma that we carry in our bodies, it doesn't have the last say. Nothing has the last say. Only we have the last say. And so I wrote about that. It was really interesting. Sometimes you have to carry your body through things. Sometimes you have to carry your pain through things. You allow your body to be what it is because it's natural. My body wasn't doing anything wrong. You know, it was what it was doing. It was trying to protect me, but it was just not wasn't the most wholesome way of processing and being in the moment. And so the parent in me kind of rose up and said, come on, little girl, come on, I'm going to carry you through this. And that's it's a really interesting kind of symbiosis almost, where you kind of like, you almost switch roles sometimes. Sometimes you have to be that little girl. You know, you have to be the baby who is joyous and full of sparkles and whatever. But then sometimes you have to be the mother that looks at her and says, okay, I'm going to protect you this time. You know, I'm going to bring you over here. You can't see why, you don't know why, but I can, and we're going to go there. And I think as you confront yourself more and more and you get to know yourself and you meet your old story, and you meet your old story through the wider concept of wanting something new for yourself through it, I think you then have these moments of epiphany and inspiration become accessible to you so that you can step out of what has made you feel victim and walk into something that can make you feel victorious, you know? And like you are back in the author seat of your life. And so again, the news story for me is always, I mean, it's caught my attention basically for the past 8 years, because it was only really through that I could heal that deep trauma that was kind of locked in my body through the miscarriages.
I was taking notes, and after this, I think I'm gonna journal and process what you're saying, because it is like, oh my God. Wow. And I'm fighting back tears because there's something so powerful about what you're saying that it's just like touching me in a very emotional place. So thank you so much.
No, thank you, my love. That's lovely. It's so nice just to talk deep, you know? Like just to talk deep from straight away. From straight up, let's just get into the deep stuff. I really enjoy it. So thank you.
Thank you. So Sam, how can people connect with you? Like what are you offering? How can people get in touch with you? Where do they find you?
Okay, so social media, my handle is Butterflies and Pebbles, and that's my business name as well. So I sell my books, my poetry, I sell journals, I do stationery every year, calendars and diaries. And so I have an Etsy shop, and it's called Butterflies and Pebbles, not and, because I couldn't fit it all in. There's only so many letters you can have in your business name. So yes, that's for social media. And also, I've got a smaller space called The Goddess in Her Mess, because this now is the new wave of my work. I'm really excited about this because I wrote this book, The Power of Mess, which again was, it was a project that came to me 3 years ago. And I mean, I love everything that I write there, but I'm also really interested in the goddess side of things. So I'm trying to bring my old stuff and my new stuff together in the Goddess and Her Mess. And so that's why I've kind of evolved the courses that I do from the Soul Reset to the Goddess and Her Mess. So I have one actually, my first one launching on Sunday. It's a 4-week experience. It's online, and I just send through materials at the beginning of every week. And we have 3 workshops in the month where we kind of just workshop together on Zoom at the weekend. And it's journaling. It's my signature journaling workshop. So we do, deep processing. I don't do as much talking because obviously it's more about everybody else kind of writing out their thoughts and sharing. But it's a really beautiful, I mean, they've become so lovely to run, these workshops, because it's amazing how much poetry you have in your heart. You just don't realize. And then you'll get the prompt and you're given the framework of like 3 minutes just to write and not edit. And the stuff that people come up with, I mean, I've said to the ladies, I want to create a book just with all the things that are written, in these sessions, because they're so beautiful and everyone is so much more creative than they realize. And these workshops offer everyone a platform to experience that about themselves as well. But yeah, through the week I send materials, so it's more me, videos, audios, and some writing, some poetry, some self-care activities. But the whole process again is just to really grasp your life as it is now and realize your power and your essence and your beauty in it. And it's there. It's always there. It's just sometimes we just don't know where and how to find it. And so hopefully I can kind of guide and facilitate a kind of map, I suppose, to locate those beautiful and necessary parts of us that really help us to move through the everyday struggles, the difficulties, and what have you. So that's available right now, and then also there's the book, The Power of Maths. It's on Amazon, it's on Barnes and Noble, it's on Indigo, it's on Waterstones, all the major book places online, in bookshops, and yeah, and I'm just focusing now on a second edition of my poetry book, and then I'm working on writing a memoir called A Goddess in Her Maths. So it's more about my experience, my life, but it kind of brings together everything that I talk about in my work as well. So yeah, I think that's about it.
Thank you so much. We are so blessed by your presence today, and we can't wait to read your books and to hear more about what's coming up for you. And just so you know, we will link everything up on our website, and so people can find it. And yeah, thank you. I'm speechless, so you'll just have to forgive me right now. I'm like having a hard time talking. Oh my God.
It's been lovely. It really, really has been lovely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Vision Chat. You can find more about us at visionofprofoundhealing.com, where we offer readings, courses, and classes.